Hey there, folks. This is your host, Kate Gaffney of Service from Hell, and I'm jumping on at the top to let you know that this is part 2 of 2 with Andrea Jones-Rooy. And let me correct myself, Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy. Dr. Jones-Rooy was on last week and this week because they had so many stories to tell, and they work in higher education, and boy, do they have some things to say about students. And they're very afraid that they're going to get fired after these 2 episodes air. So, they may really need you to go buy their album or, see them perform somewhere because they may be out of work because of how honest they got. So that's why I'm like, we're going to make this a 2-parter. We really appreciate you folks listening. Find Andrea on all the things. That will be in the show notes or wherever you're listening right now. So this is part 2 of 2 with Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy. Let's get on with the show. So we did the how many customer service jobs you had. Which has been your favorite of all of the customer service jobs?
I think lifeguarding was pretty clearly
I thought you were going to say that. That's so funny. Okay.
Yeah. When I first got into it, some more senior lifeguard, some dude who was 3 years older than me, but he graduated high school, so we all thought he was an adult, which technically he was. He was like, "This is the best job in the world. You'll see." And at the time, I was like, "This isn't that great." And every day, maybe he just seeded that in my, planted that seed in my brain. But
Sure.
Every day since then, I was like, lifeguarding was where it was at. You're not working nights. You're just sitting outside. Everyone's having a good time. One mom got mad at me because I was like playing like this. She had this like 12-year-old daughter, and we were like jumping off the side and doing cannonballs. And she thought that was irresponsible. And I was like, okay,
fine.
I'll stop.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thrilled.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm doing you a favor by babysitting your kid, but what on my,
Cool.
when it's not my shift. But
yeah. But at
plus
least
you get to sit in the chair and do the thing with the whistle where you spin the whistle
good.
around.
It's so good.
And you're straight out of an 80s movie.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And people look at you with such reverence, like even your own peers that are your same age. It's like, oh, that's the cool job. Like,
yeah. You stand up and do you remember the whistle?
Adult Swim?
Adult Swim.
Yeah. It was so good. You had all the power, and then all the kids had to get out of the pool, and it was like, man, this sucks. But then you also got to blow the whistle for them to get back in. So it was like this dichotomy. Yeah, you had all the power.
They would sit and watch and wait for you to stand up.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Great.
So least favorite of all of the customer service jobs?
Teaching.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I think.
And that makes me sad for you.
Yeah, waiting tables is no joke, as you've said, and I'm sure discussed at length on this show, but I don't know why, but I don't know, maybe it was expectations. Like you go in expecting people to be jerks. And for me anyway, I didn't take it that personally.
Sure.
Whereas here it's like, I'm actually trying to share something I care about with you. Like I'm not just here teaching about some crap. I don't know.
Well, and I think it speaks to the sort of heart center of what got you in, like being able to, discuss things with the next generation and inform them and empower them and make them, feel like there is hope. And then to have them be the ones that are chipping away at your hope. It's an irony that can't really be fully explored.
And it didn't used to be like that. And that's where I'm like, am I just old and out of touch? Or and there's a million reasons that these things could have gone. One of the working hypotheses that I've heard people say is that the pandemic set everyone back emotionally, in maturation by 2 years.
Oh, so
maybe I'm just teaching 16-year-old. I don't know.
Well,
maybe that's what's going on.
They're studying it, and they're saying I can't. This isn't my area of expertise, but I've read a handful of articles that are saying that because of it was literally arrested development because it forced us to. It's why people keep commenting. I'm sure you've heard this in your circles. I keep hearing this from people like, did you have to relearn how to be out in public with people? And I still find myself in social settings where I'm like awash with, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here. I never had that before. It was like, I want to be out and about and in the mix. And now I'm like, people are exhausting. Like it's so we are, I think that there is a piece of it that is that, but also that, you are educating the current participation trophy group of humans. So there is, it's like, it's probably a mix of everything. Anyway, okay, so that's your least favorite, and that's a bummer. What's the weirdest thing you've been asked to do whilst on the clock?
Put out a cigarette in someone else's mouth.
Oh, I have to know the context, please.
Yeah. This was in teaching, obviously. So it was in the statistics week. After my circus, the circus themed nightclub where I worked in Shanghai closed. I was still in Shanghai for another year or so. And so a lot of my fellow performers and I did freelance stuff. And so what that often looked like would be, as I was saying, is sort of a big birthday party or a company dinner. One thing that's fun is that in China, at least then, this was 2015, 2016, companies could show that they were very fancy by hiring foreigners to dance for them. So there was a specific ask for performers who were white, basically, and non-Chinese, but mostly white. There's some serious racism going on there as well. But we did it. Okay. But then we would also get hired by these very rich, very bored people who had these penthouse apartments, and they would host these like not quite Eyes Wide Shut style, but wannabe. Like no one was like having sex or doing anything, but people were like probably going to after we left. And so we would get hired. A lot of my friends were burlesque performers, and so I picked up some of that. I'm very bad at it, but I could do it. And we'd put on point shoes, and we'd cover our mouths with like a cloth mask, and we'd walk around smoking cigarettes, and they taught me how to put a cigarette out on my own tongue, which basically you pool a lot of spit in the kind of like bowl of your tongue, and you can put it out there. You just move quickly, and it only kind of hurts a little bit. And so we were at one of these things, and the main rich dude, he's like, jacked up on all the drugs and all the whatever, comes out, and he was like, now put it out on me. And you're just like this. And I remember there was a point where I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I did it. He was fine. But it was, you're just like, this isn't the plan.
This ain't it. This ain't
fun. Yeah.
You're like having a crisis of conscience in the middle of it. Like, well, I'm still going to do this because I was hired to do this.
Obviously, the show must go on.
Yeah, I mean, it must.
Music is playing. We got to go. Yeah. I mean, this dude is going to pay us. And, and you get paid in China in cash. It's a very cash-based society in general. You definitely get paid in cash. And their 100 kwai notes, which are about $20, are these bright pink bills. And so you kind of get this feeling that you're getting Monopoly money at the end, but they're really big. And so you just do all this crazy fucked up shit. And then they're like, and here is some pink joke money for you. I mean, it's worth money. It's just, the whole thing's so strange.
What a dystopian reality. That's very cool. You need to write a book. Okay.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Okay.
As you can see, I can't focus, but I would love to.
Yeah, but your writing your Tumblr is crazy good. Like your writing is really, really good.
Wow, you did your research. My Tumblr is a deep cut.
I did, yeah, deep dive. Okay. So that's the weirdest thing you've been asked to do. What's an incident that made them ask to speak to your manager? I guess in this case, I mean, that could be academia, so I don't know what the equivalent, the dean, I guess, of the school or whatever or if there's a managerial entity that got spoken to at any of your jobs. Yeah,
the teaching one for sure. I can't go into a ton of detail on this, but we have, unfortunately, as I said, cheating and academic integrity violations, as we call them. And I am the director of undergraduate studies, which means that if a professor in any data science course suspects a student of cheating, they come to me and one other staff member to have a kind of like a hearing where they plead their case. And then we decide if they're guilty or innocent. And then they have the option to then sign the form and accept the punishment or escalate to the dean. And it almost always gets escalated to the dean. So I don't know if that's I need to talk to your manager, but they'll be like, thanks, but no. And you're like, I literally caught you. Okay. I mean, airtight cases. I'm not a lawyer. It's an insane thing to even be doing. But, and it's horrible because they come on and they're crying and they're on, a lot of them have been on Zoom and it's horrible. But you look at the evidence and you're like, well, your answer is identical to this other student, or it's literally, the code that we told you not to copy from this website. And it's just that, we're not, guilty until proven innocent. We're pretty lenient, but there are cases where you're just like, there's just no way. And as I said, we put in some ways to test where we give out like slightly different assignments. And if they answer it in a different way, we know that they cheated. Like there's just no way you thought of 7.5 as your whatever. So
it's interesting. Yeah, I don't want you to have to give away the secrets to the sauce. But so what is I guess in the case of that, because I was not bold enough to cheat. I just wasn't smart enough, I guess. But what is the consequence? Is it possible that they get kicked out of the school? Do they just fail the grade? Like, are there big consequences, or is it mostly you get an F on this assignment?
It depends on the assignment and the nature of the cheating. And, the higher the stakes assignment, the more serious the penalty. But, at minimum, you're going to get a 0 on whatever assignment that you've been found guilty for. And a 0 on a midterm or a final can pretty much tank your grade, especially if you consider an A- to be a failing grade. I mean, you're in B territory. So forget it. Just give up. Just be homeless, right? There's no chance. But But if it's a big one, if it's something that it's very obvious that, we saw you with notes in the exam room, it's up to the professor to say what the penalty is. And so the professor can say either an F on the assignment or on the whole class. And you usually state that in your syllabus. So it can vary by professor. Ours is a 0 on the assignment and escalation to the dean, who will then decide if something else happens. But after 2, you're supposed to get kicked out, I thought. You're supposed to get kicked out of the entire school. And we had a case where a student was caught cheating on 2 separate assignments in the same class, 1 month apart or so. And the student did not get kicked out. And that broke my confidence that the deans have our back in a way.
Yeah.
And I can't say much more about this, but it was very frustrating. And I think it comes back to I'm guessing here, but like the tuition thing.
I was just thinking that. Yep. Yeah.
And the amount of agony that it would be for that professor and that student or that dean, and then the parents will fight, and then this and then that. And so they were like, And you're like, really? Someone who cheats, gets caught, gets told not to cheat, gets a 0 on the assignment, and then does it again? Really?
I would just be disheartened always. I mean, maybe it's too negative of me to say that, but I would just feel like, if there are no consequences, then what's the point in having rules? And also, well, fine, just start farming out A's. Who cares? It'd just be hard to. And then the kids who don't do that are the ones you don't remember, and the ones that get overlooked, and the ones who are just like, I just want to earn an honest A. Those are the ones that, it just sort of reinforces that life principle of like, no, there's not really consequences for cheating. You still get the A, and like you get to move on. That would make me crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the speaking to the dean. Have you ever had a parent say, I'm talking to the dean about you?
No.
Oh, that's good.
I feel like now that I've said that,
I'll knock wood.
That might happen.
Knock wood somewhere.
Like, oh, Jesus.
Okay.
Not that I know of. We've had parents call in and be like, I think the curriculum is too challenging or not challenging enough, but it's not really about me.
Yeah. It's just a general. Yeah. Have you taught? Yeah. So is NYU the only institution of higher learning that you've been a professor, or have you taught at other schools and have a comparative, like you can say, oh, well, if it's not as much of a high price point for tuition, the audience is or the students are different, or have you only taught at NYU?
So NYU and NYU Shanghai did have different admissions processes, and they were quite different types of students, I would say. Just as far as, NYU Shanghai is this kind of wild outpost on the other side of the world. So a different sort of student chooses to travel to whatever.
Yeah.
But before that, I was at Carnegie Mellon, and then before that at Michigan, at University of Michigan, but I was only a TA, so I didn't have full visibility, but I did interact with the students quite a bit.
Okay.
The most recent, and that's where I'm like, I don't know what's changed. It's definitely much worse than it ever was.
Okay.
But I'm also have only been teaching these huge classes for the last 3 years. Every other class I taught before that was 30 students. So maybe you just get more of the good, It's like if the manager goes around and has a restaurant that's a size that every night he can say, or she or they can say, how was your meal? And they say, oh, it's wonderful. Maybe the one bad one doesn't drive you as out of your mind.
Sure.
Whereas, you're not going to walk through a whole cafeteria. Like now I just feel like I'm just yelling.
Sure.
I'm like a flight attendant, and the passengers are unruly. I mean, I've never been a flight attendant. I'm sure it's much harder, but that's how it feels. Like we just did the exam, and I just had to be like, I'm in a microphone, just like, stop writing. The time is up, and everyone's still scripting. Like, I'm losing my.
Oh boy, yeah, that would be.
I'm like a third grade soccer coach sometimes. That's I'm gonna get fired. Honestly, this whole thing might save me a choice. I'll just let them kick me out. Let's go.
We'll talk after. Okay. So do you think that I guess you've already sort of answered this, but like, do you think it's a conflict, the amount of power that the customers or the students or the people on the receiving end of the service or the situation, do you think it's upsetting or weird how much power it seems like they now wield? And does it seem like it's more than it used to be, or is it just society has shifted?
I think the power has shifted a bit, but I don't know how much of that is the same in restaurants and other places where you can just take to Yelp and tank a business, right? Like we kind of all have more air quotes power in a way to be a huge pain and just drag someone on the internet. So I don't know if it's any more different or worse than other industries. I think the expectations have changed from the purchaser, right? So when I was in college, I didn't think I was paying tuition to get a good grade. I actually thought I was there to learn something. And I really feel like an old person saying this, and I just don't, again, I'm not hearing from those students who are there for the experience. I'm hearing from the students who are there for a bullet point on their resume that says this degree with this GPA. And so the expectation is, well, I'm paying this, I got in, I've bought the A, is almost how it feels.
That's what I'm hearing. I didn't, yeah. But
it's a similar mentality to what we were talking about with comedy shows, where someone says, well, if I don't like the show, do I get a refund? And you're like, well, no. You're buying the experience, and you've had the experience. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a level of entitlement that's happening to all of us where, every now and again you go to a movie that's horrible and you can complain about it, but not really. I don't think you get a refund at the movies if you're like, I don't like it.
Yeah, there is I think sort of an unrealistic expectation that every experience exists exclusively for me, even a group experience. Yeah. It's like, no, but this is just for me. And it's like, well, if Jacob enjoyed it and Tina enjoyed it and you didn't, that doesn't mean the show was a failure. It just means,
right.
I mean, it's sort of, or that the class. Yeah. Right. It's that idea that everything is meant to be for me all the time in all circumstances. I don't know what that is.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah. And I see that too, even not in like kind of big, you're ruining my life complaints, but I wish we spent more time on this concept and less time on that concept. And it's like, well, I'm spending time on them in proportion to how important I think they are. And so good luck to you out there when you don't know this one big thing that I think is important because you wanted to learn more programming or whatever, right? It's like, this isn't a buffet.
Yeah. And I guess, and look, there's certain contexts in which it's like, I can just express a desire, but that doesn't have to be, my professor was bad. It can be like, oh man, I wish they had covered more about apes because I really like apes, but all they did was talk about ants, but I guess ants are important, whatever. But bummer, I wish I knew more about apes. But it's like, yeah, but you fine. Like you can express a preference, but that doesn't mean then I'm coming for my professor and I want them to be fired and I want to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, I don't know that much to your point about one Yelp review can tank a business. It's like, yeah, that's a little, okay.
Well, and it's not to say that I'm, I don't want to sound, I'm sort of maybe overcorrecting or sounding more callous to all of this. Like I'm just so used to hearing the horrible stuff that it's not like I do want to make sure that I'm teaching things that are useful. But
of course,
I do wish the students would occasionally acknowledge that like maybe because I'm doing all this consulting and I'm seeing what companies are really falling short on and they're looking for data scientists. And it's like, well, I'm going to teach you these things that I specifically think the world needs. And I'm not just going to teach you crap because I don't feel like updating. I'm always going to update my syllabus. But there's a kind of antagonism. I don't know why I said it that way. There's a kind of antagonism. Antagonism. Yeah, antagonism that the students sort of like assume I'm there to be against them when it's like, I'm actually putting these things in the syllabus because I think they're important and I'm open to being wrong. But it's less the content of it, but it's like the tone. It's like you're wronging me by spending more time on measurement than on coding. And it's like, I'm telling you, the whole world is doing data science wrong because they're skipping measurement. And that's like, it's true. But the sense is that I'm doing it to mess with them, right? And like ruin them.
Yeah. Us versus them is sort of I do think there's this is too hippie maybe to say, but there's a bit of an energy of that in our entire country in all areas. Yeah. As no, everything's a fight. I got to muscle up for every moment, as opposed to maybe this person knows a little more than I do. And also I forgot that you coming from the consulting world, you're essentially telling them how to win in the job market because you're saying like, learn these things, you'll get hired. Okay. Yeah. What was the last straw that got you out of any of these jobs? Or like, I guess we've touched on some of it, but like, was there ever a job where you were like, flip a table, get me out of here, I'm done? Or was everything kind of at its own natural sort of course end?
I don't have the self-esteem really
Same.
to flip a table. The things I've left have been more because like the company folded.
Yep. Same. Yeah.
The only one I really left was academia the first time. And I had tried to quit and I couldn't. And I would go crawling back, or I'd say, I'm sorry, maybe I could take you. And I actually had an argument with she a dean? She might have been a provost at NYU Shanghai on the day of the final exam, the day before I quit my job, where this is so petty, but I was building this quantitative program in social science. And I was like, I want to be the director of this program. And she said, well, you're too junior a faculty member. We need a senior faculty member to do this. And I was like, well, you were more than happy to let me spend the last 2 years, not for extra pay, building the program, getting approval from the US and Chinese government, speaking to all these people, setting up the curriculum, interview, blah, 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 blah. You were more than happy to accept that. I would like to direct the program. And she was like, no. And I was like, I'm out of here. Like that kind of was the sealed the deal on something that I had been thinking about for years. But that was one of the big things that caused me to get out.
Yeah, the universe was like, nah, you got to get it. This ain't it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Immediately after that meeting, I had to go proctor a final exam for my comparative politics class. And while my students took the exam, I just read this Lena Dunham essay about why she quit her job like a million years ago. And I was like, if Lena can do it, I can
do it.
Obviously, she's not everyone's favorite icon at the moment. But at the time, I was like, yes, I'm going to get out.
All you needed was just a little nudge. Yeah. So how long after that conversation to quitting? What was the timeline?
It was like 12 hours.
Damn!
Yeah. I mean, again, I've been thinking about it forever. And I'd already even sent some torturous emails that I backtracked on. But I was immediately flew the next day. This was like mid-December 2015 from Shanghai back to the US for winter break. And I was on the flight that next day, like that next morning from Shanghai. I had a layover in LA. And on the flight to LA, it's about a 10-hour flight. I watched, if you know how much detail you want on this, I watched a couple episodes of the TV show Fargo. And it's obviously, I mean, I didn't actually finish it, but the first few episodes, all I could think about was how miserable these people looked in their like little lives that were, I mean, obviously they were about to all go through meat grinders and it's about to get horrible, but I was just like so focused on people who had chosen the safe path and how miserable they looked that I like sat there and I drank all this like Delta Airlines boxed wine. And I was like, I got to change my life. I got to get out of here. And so we landed in LA and I opened my email and I sent an email and I was like, I'm out. And so I don't recommend it.
Sure.
But it was pretty exciting at the time. I drank a margarita in the basement of LAX. Like, what have I done? But it was kind of fun.
That's amazing. You do have a story like that where you lit it up. That's great.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. You did it professionally with warning and like, you know, you did it the right way, but you did it. You did it though.
I mean, I still did it over email.
Yeah.
That's kind of,
I mean, it's a little gangster. No, it's gangster. It's gangster. It's like, this is happening. Yeah. So did you end up going back to Shanghai and getting your stuff or did you have it sent to you? Oh, you did go back. Okay.
I did. The tough thing about academia, one of the tough things is as far as how hard it is to quit, is it works on such a long schedule that there's no, I mean, I guess I could give 2 weeks notice, but I wrote that email and said I'm out, meaning I would finish teaching the spring semester. So it meant I was out in like May 2016. So
you're like, so professional.
Like right now, my conversation with NYU about my future is about starting in the fall 2023 term. So I'm still, regardless, I mean, I guess I could go. I just don't know what would happen because it's just on such a slow schedule to figure out, you know, how, because the classes go listed and then you're there. I don't know what the contract is. Maybe I could quit. Anyway, yeah, I went back to collect my things and teach an entire other course.
Nah, but you're thinking the whole time, like, we broke up. I can do whatever I want. Like, I'm eating this spaghetti with this person over here. Have you ever told a customer, student, anyone to like F off or like in some sort of polite way of like, nah, you're not going to win this one? Or has it all been just kind of like you have to tiptoe and do the dance?
I've gone a few times. I've had to go with students either in meetings or in email to say, I almost feel like a stern parent where I'm just like, that's the end of the conversation. Like it's over. Like, we're done. And it sucks to have to go there, but you're there. I've even had students where they're like, you know, arguing over a point for the homework. And they're like, and it's a multiple choice question that they got wrong. And they're like, well, it could have been this other thing. And you're like, okay. And one time I had a student, this is years ago, one student was just like, come on, it's 1 point. And I was like, yeah, it's 1 point.
That you missed.
Like, you're not, oh. But yeah, so I usually have to be like, we could, you know, more diplomatic. Like I consider the matter closed. This is the end of the discussion. Wow. I almost never, I try not to go there, but you have to.
Do you run into anything with like, so because you're doing stand up and you said, you can talk, you're talking about your life, so you're storytelling. Do you ever run into a thing where you're like, yo, I'm up at the cellar, and then you see a student walk in and you're like, that student's about to find out how I really feel about them?
Yeah.
Have you had that?
I've had students in shows before, but they've all luckily been former students or students who are in the program but not in my class.
Okay.
And so, no, it is a little bit embarrassing because I like sell tickets on the street sometimes. And so then students see that and they're like, what? Why are you? So that's actually more embarrassing than being on stage. On stage, I like to think that I like to think that people think I'm doing a caricature. And I am to an extent. I'll be like, I don't care about these students. I don't know, and I'm exaggerating some of it. And so I like to think that they're in on the joke. But I mean, yeah, I'm not making it up. It's coming from somewhere.
You're like, but this happened. Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I wrote a note to myself because I don't have a question that would like force this kind of conversation, but I really want to know about being a champagne girl. And so like so they would just buy, they being the club, or would they be patrons? They would buy 100 bottles of champagne. And then the expectation was you were the sparkler person that was like bringing it out and whatever. And you would do this in a group. But was it the whole night of just rotating those 100 bottles every so often, or what did that look like?
It was very bizarre. We would call it a blackout. So in Shanghai, it at the time was a very big deal to like show off your wealth in a way that in the US, like you just don't. And so it was I think it was always Chinese clients who would come in and they'd have like a big, like bottle service kind of area of the club with seats and whatever. And it would usually be early on in the night. And they would say, this only happened like 4 or 5 times over 2 years. And they would say, we want the 100 bottles. We want the blackout. And so the whole club, we'd be like, okay. And the whole club would go dark. And the DJ would have to play some very specific, like ominous music. And then Eye of the Tiger would come on. Like,
yes. I'm so glad I asked.
I think that's, I'm not bad at music. Anyway. And we'd all come out in our parade and we'd carry as many as we could. And then a train of servers behind us. And my understanding, I always wondered what happened to the 100 bottles. We bring out like 10. And I think the servers would kind of keep the rotation going. But my understanding was that meant that one thing you could do was save it for the next time you came. And so you kind of did it for the big show. And then, a month later, you're entertaining some other group. And so you bring them and you have the rest of the bottles waiting for you, I think. Or, frankly, these people had so much money, it might have just been they would do it for the show, drink 10 or 12, and then never do anything with the rest. Honestly, I think
you imagine? Can you imagine?
Isn't that crazy?
The wretched excess. Like I don't want to make it about that, but anyway, but being the champagne person, so you're doing the sparklers, you're doing the whatever. At that stage, were you also at the, like, I'm going to eat some fire and really ramp this up, or was it just sparklers?
Just sparklers for that.
Okay.
So the club had kind of a big stage in the middle of it, and then a bunch of smaller podiums around where you sort of do smaller acts. And then if you were on the ground doing the champagne show with clients, you were just drinking and saying cheers and doing whatever. And so we got to the point, though, because we would come down from stage exhausted and they'd be like, champagne show. And you have to run to the back and you're out of breath. So we started calling champagne our Gatorade because we're, like worn out. I'm like, I need some Gatorade. I'm like, oh, champagne show. Great. So we would just, the idea was for the clients to feel, or the customers, I don't know what the word is, Karen in Chinese.
Okay.
Yeah. And to feel very special that we were like with them. So then we would do that for a bit and then we'd go back and then be on stage again and do our actual act. So we never did any fire or anything. We would just be in costumes so they could take pictures and stuff like that. But we would get told if our podium was near one of the big spenders, we would get told to interact with them more than usual from those little things. And I mean, people are dumb and, they try to climb on the trapeze and they try to like wrap themselves in the silks and they try to take the fire. You're like, just stop it.
Yeah, don't do that.
You're going to die. Yeah. You're going to die.
Yeah, you
That's
are.
what's going to happen.
And so could you give us an US dollars equivalent to how much a night like that would pull in for you personally? Like, what would you leave with?
What would I leave with?
Yeah.
800 kwai, which is at the time probably about $120 US.
Oh, so not a lot. I thought way more. Wow.
No, you'd think. Sometimes they give us tips, but generally the club made a ton of money and no one else did. I mean, it wasn't like a stripper thing where you go and you get money every time you go around. Like it was maybe once or twice a week, someone would give you one of those 100 kwais that I was talking about. So barely anything, frankly.
Damn. I'm shocked. Yeah. I thought for sure you were going to be like, oh, we were rolling in like $100 every minute. Like we were pulling.
Nope.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But you did it.
Someone made a lot of money.
Yeah. Wasn't you. But it was for love of the game. You were like, I just like performing and this is okay.
It was also pretty great because, I mean, it did make a big difference for me financially because I had my day job at NYU. And so at NYU Shanghai. And so this was just bonus money for
Got
me.
it.
And maybe others for whom most everyone else, it was their primary job. And so maybe they got paid more. But I was on a kind of contract where it was $800 a night. And it was all cash, they'd give it to you in a big creepy envelope. And so it's not taxed like by anybody. And it was just bonus, an extra $120 a day to do whatever you want for something that I was thrilled to be doing was
play
awesome.
money. Yeah, that's the deal. You would have done it for free kind of thing. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm aware of the time and I know we lose you soon. So I want to make sure we get the questions that everybody wants to hear. So are you a tipper?
Yes.
Okay. What's your average?
I tip a lot.
You do?
25%.
Damn.
I get at restaurants. I get bad at it when it comes to like cafes and stuff where there's like a tip jar. And then if it's a local cafe versus a Starbucks, like I'm not universally amazing, but I try 25 if I'm sitting in a restaurant, probably 20 for like a Lyft Uber situation. When I get my hair cut, it's a free for all. I just make up a number. I don't know.
You're like, here's just money. Here's just, here it is.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many bodily fluids have been on your person whilst you were working in customer service?
Oh.
All of them?
All of them.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
All of them.
Okay.
We've had people, at the club throw up everywhere because they drank too much of their 100 bottles of champagne. And I was one of the few people who spoke some Chinese and English. The people either spoke only Chinese or only English. So they would be like, go up to her, find out where she's from. And you have to like step through barf to get, anyway, yeah.
Wait, why find out where she's from?
Well, like to find out where she's from in the sense of like to put her in a cab and go home, not like from what country you're from.
Bless.
Like, if she's French or English, then we'll help her. Yeah, yeah. No, like which part of the city? How do
we get this person home? Oh, bless.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever been fired from a customer service job?
Not fired, but I wasn't asked. I eventually stopped being asked back at a comedy club, and so I kind of considered it a firing. It was like to sell tickets though, not to like perform.
Okay, because he was just not working. Did you hate the job?
I didn't love the job. I am working through comedy is a totally fucked up industry, as I'm sure you know too well. Mm-hmm. It was this particular club, so it was like kind of rumored that they wanted people who were, I'm a little bit upset about it, who they wanted to book people in their like barking, selling, hosting pipeline who really wanted to make a full-time career in comedy. And I was seen as not committed enough to be worth that investment because I was doing other things.
Because you have to pay your bills, because you have a life, because that's cool.
Right.
That feels good.
Right. So I'm now at a different club around the corner. And I actually, from the beginning, I was like, I do other things. And they were like, great. That means that you do comedy because you love it. We're thrilled to have you. And I was like, thank you. That's very nice.
That's a good...
Who knows? Maybe they just thought I wasn't funny. That could also be the case.
Not true. You're hilarious.
So yeah, not fired, but that's because there's no paperwork in comedy. It's just,
turns out. Yeah. If only there were comedy HR, things would be different.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever not tip? I know you said cafes and stuff. It's not an active choice. It's just whatever. But is there an incident where you're like, oh, I am not tipping this person?
Not in a like... service was so bad I won't do it. Something I'm ashamed of, and I'm going to get in trouble, is if I'm performing at a club, you get a drink ticket sometimes because that's how you get paid in comedy. And I would go redeem it for whatever, a can of beer, and I wouldn't tip. It didn't occur to me to tip because I was like, I'm working here, you're working here. And then I realized like 2 years in that all the other comics were tipping like $1 or whatever because you're a decent person. And so I was like, oh, I'm a real dick. So there was a long stretch where I was like, if I'm working, I'm not going to tip someone else who's working here. And I should have been, I think, because
it's such a great, because as someone who worked at a comedy club, we used to like comics who would get those free drink tickets depending on the level of the show would rarely tip us. And then we would name shame those comics and be like, did so-and-so tip you? It's like, yeah, no, so-and-so didn't tip me either. And blah, blah, blah. And so
I'm sure they did that to me. Maybe that's why I got fired.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. But I get it. Your point is, but it also, your point is right that I hadn't thought of. It's like, well, we are both working. So it is an interesting, I think it's because we had so many like ridiculously famous comics that we would serve that would give us crazy tips that we got greedy, and it was like, well, everybody should be tipping us. But I didn't think about it. It's like we are all at a job. It's a weird job. We are all at a job. Okay.
And I wasn't ordering like handmade martini
with a muddler or like
I still feel bad about it.
Yeah, that's okay.
And it only occurred to me because someone came up to me and they were like, do you have like any singles? I want to tip the bartender. And I was like, what for? He was like, you got to get it together, man. I'm like, oh, shit.
You're being honest though, Andrea. Appreciate honesty here. That's good. You learned and you're doing better. Isn't that what we're all trying to do?
Yeah.
That's what we're all trying to do. Okay. So last question in this section, who is either the interaction with the worst customer you've ever had to, or worst whatever, client, student, whatever, or an archetype of who the worst actually is? And you've touched on it. You've said, the entitled, the can't hear no, those kinds of people. So for sure that. But do you have an incident or a story that would answer that?
I mean, the only other one that I haven't really gotten to, there's the complaining ones that kind of just break my soul. But I've had the ones where they're not complaining, but they're, usually male, or I assume masculine identifying students who come in and they just they sit too close to you and they like make jokes and they think that you're insider friends with each other. I had a student who after lecture would hang out thinking that we had like private, let's chat. Like he would be like, here's my thoughts on the lecture and what do you think? And then I'd be like, I have to go. And he'd be like, oh, I'll walk you to your next thing. So I would lie about what building I had to go to, nothing like actual like Me Too, sexual harassment, nothing like that. But it was weird enough that I was just like, leave me alone, man. Like, so it's like the ones, and I feel like in saying this, I'm like, no, the nice students aren't going to come talk to me because they're going to be like, well, if you're nice, Andrew doesn't like you. And if you're mean, Andrew doesn't like you. But it's like, they would get too, like, we're not friends, Yeah. And then they would email me long after the semester's over and be like, we should catch up. It's like, we shouldn't.
We shouldn't. Yeah. That's not what this is.
Yeah.
Actually.
And I don't want to make it weird and I don't want to assume. And it's never anything that I would even think I needed to report. But there's been stuff where it's like gone far enough that I'm like, I might need to report this. And then
ooh, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not much. Very rare. But that's
honest. You've been honest this whole time. Appreciate it. Okay.
There we go. What if I was like, I made it all up? I've never been a teacher in my life.
You know what? I'd be like, you are the best actor and I can't wait to see you in an audition room and you're going to crush it and get the part over me. So maybe I don't want to see you in an audition room. Yeah, because I believe you. Okay, folks, we're going to move on to the good stuff. We hoped you saved room for dessert. Okay. This is the nice section. So,
all right.
What is the nicest thing a customer or a student or whomever has done for you whilst you were working?
I got a card from a student. Maybe I have some recency bias here, but I got a card from a student from several semesters ago, somewhat recently. And she said, you said at the beginning of your class, Data Science for Everyone, that the reason you teach this class is to encourage people who wouldn't otherwise get involved in data science to get involved in data science. And I wanted to tell you that I am one of those students and I would not be in data science if it weren't for you. And because of your class, I've now done these other things and I'm doing this and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Oh, me
so it was
too.
Like, yeah, like I get thank you notes and really nice things from students. So I'm obviously that's less interesting as we haven't talked about it at length, but I do get every semester a handful of those. But this was a really particularly moving one because it was like, the thing that you said was most important, like you did it.
Oh, nice. That is really lovely. That's really lovely. Yeah. Who's your favorite customer you ever interacted with? We're not going to include students because I feel like that would get too obvious. So what's do you remember like when you were lifeguarding or when you were being the champagne person or whatever did you have like a favorite customer moment where you're like, oh, this person sticks out so hard for me?
I mean, this is so bad, but in the circus, it was anyone who just wasn't creepy. Like if they were just like, oh, hi, you're a human. I'm going to treat you with respect. Great.
The bar
Not
is
like,
so
I'm going to
low.
grab your ass. I'm going to make you drink too much. I'm going to do this. And I think that you're blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Just like, oh, hey, how are you? Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Wow.
That's so depressing.
The bar is so low. No, but it's honest.
The bar is so low.
It's honest.
There's one other at Perkins. I had a whole table, a huge tray and I stepped out of the kitchen, dropped the entire tray, just all over everything, 10 people, just massive. And a different table that I was also serving of like 3 people saw it all happen. And a few minutes later, I was like over kind of regrouping and she came up. I was in high school. She was probably 70. She came up and she gave me a hug and she was like, I think you're doing great. And I was like, okay.
That's really lovely.
There's something from the 1998 vault for you.
Yeah, I like that vault.
Yeah.
Okay, that's positive. Yeah. Okay. What's the best tip you've ever gotten whilst you're doing any of these jobs? And I mean like cash tip.
Yeah, not like good advice.
Not good advice or good advice. Whatever.
Yeah, good advice. I probably got, every now and again, you'd get these monster ones at Circus, and I probably got maybe like $500.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean once.
Okay.
In a lot of doing this, but yeah.
You can dine out on that for a minute, though. That would carry me through.
It would be higher given how many bottles of champagne they're buying, but
you would think that, and how much fire you didn't eat fire in that job, but anyway, okay. And what's the best lesson you have personally learned from working in customer service of any kind?
I would say, okay, I have two. Is two allowed?
Yes, please.
All right. The first one, the bigger one, is whenever I did Circus, people would always ask me, yeah, but what do you really do? And what's your actual job? And what are you trying to get to? And at the time, I wasn't trying to get to anything. If anything, that was my main thing. And I did teaching because I kind of felt like I couldn't get out of it. And I always felt bad answering and saying, well, I'm a professor. And they'd be like, wow, oh my God. Because my colleagues were circus performers full time. And if anything, I was the imposter and I aspired to be like them. And so I would often lie and say, this is what I do. And so just because something isn't something you think is a full-time job or respectable or whatever, it doesn't mean that they're doing it to get to something else. And then the other one, the lesser one, is I sell comedy tickets on the street, and it just sucks when people, like, I know I'm being annoying, but it's the people who like ignore you rather than are like, no, thanks. Like, I really appreciate when people are like, no, thanks. And it's not, and so I try to, like, when people try to talk to me about, supporting the environment on the street, I try to at least acknowledge that they're human, or like homeless, unhoused people and stuff like that.
Sure.
It's a minor one, but it's like, there's a lot of people on the street who are not doing well. Say hi. It's okay.
Yeah. And I don't actually think it's that minor. And I do think every time I see those types of people, I do ignore not the unhoused, but like the people handing out flowers. I'm always like, ugh, go away, get out of my face.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for no thank you, or at least acknowledging that it is a human doing a job that maybe isn't goals. Like, I don't know how much handing shit out on the street is someone being like, I've made it. This is really what I want to do. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. But I doubt it. And what is one piece of advice you would give to customers who interact with customer service workers?
Maybe this is what everyone says on this show, but like, we're all humans and mostly don't mean any harm. We're probably just trying to either do a job that we're doing to pay bills or to like be to the next step, as I said, or it's something you really love doing and it's your life's calling and you're very excited. Either way, we all actually want to have a good experience. Like, we're not your enemy.
I love that. Well, is there anything else you wish that people knew, that you're like, boy, if I had an opportunity to just say this thing, whether it be in academia or customer service or whatever, or, no pressure to answer this. You've given us a lot. But.
Yeah. I'll lean towards academia on this one. And I think I need to remind this to myself too, is that learning can be very fun and it's certainly very rewarding. But the process of learning things can also be very unpleasant, in the sense that you need to go out of your comfort zone and you're going to feel bad at something. And that's true whether you're trying to like get into comedy or set yourself on fire or learn data science. And if it feels bad, that's not necessarily a sign that you're doing it wrong. Because I think a lot of times they're like, this is hard. This must not be the field for me. It's like, no. Like, you're going to feel great. Just keep going. And that's probably horrible advice because there's plenty of circumstances where you should stop. But I think that we're used to being told that learning is like this great thing. And so if it feels bad, it feels wrong. And I don't think that's true. My friend and I do this after comedy shows. Like, we'll bomb on stage and be like, well, these are the shows where you get better. Like, you learn more from the bad ones, right? And I think you can learn from assignments that you don't do well on just as much as the ones you do well.
I love that. No one has ever said that. I really love that.
Well,
it doesn't always have to be comfy. I really appreciate that. Well, Andrea, how can people get in touch with you? Can they take a class of yours online? Can people do like, drop-in classes even if they're not registered with NYU? Where are you next playing with fire? Like, What can people, I know you said you do less of that in New York. So how do people get eyes on you?
Every now and again, I do fire on my porch, and I'll keep you posted. I did some Zoom fire shows during the pandemic. That was fun. Alas, you can't drop in, but you're welcome to apply to NYU and cough up some tuition money and take my class. I'm looking into putting some of my teaching content online. I don't like the word content. I feel like I don't know. That feels too general.
Sure.
Cut all this, right? I'm trying to put my teaching material online.
Okay.
YouTube or whatever. Because I do think that everyone can get involved. Otherwise, you can find me on all the social medias. I post videos about social and data science on TikTok, and I'm at Jones-Rooy on all those things. JONESROOY.
Is there a dash or anything, or it's all just one word?
All one word.
Okay, perfect. Well,
and jonesrooy.com, all one word, no dash.
Amazing. Well, folks, we're going to drop your checks now. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us out here at Service from Hell, we'd love to have you subscribe, rate, and or review the show wherever you listen. It will help us reach more people that need to be schooled on the art of being kind and will be catharsis for those of us still working in the industry. If you want to get in touch with us here directly at Service from Hell, send us your receipts to servicefromhellpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. Remember, if you can't afford a tip, you can't afford to go out. So don't be garbage and be good to people. It's easier that way. Thanks for being on, Andrea. You gave us so much of your time. This was so lovely. You totally understood the assignment. We really, really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. This was very cathartic to talk about.
What a pleasure. Okay, folks, thank you so much for listening. Good night. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up our 2-part interview with Andrea Jones-Rooy. It was such a pleasure. We learned so much and we could have kept going. So find them on all of the things. Thank you, folks, so much for listening. Good night.